Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
And my sweetness.
All right, so this week's topic I spoke to you about previously. I wanted to make sure I'm clarifying. What I'm saying was that when you were a kid, it was a lot safer being a kid than when I was a kid, it was a lot more dangerous. And my question is, how much of that was fabricated and how much of that was real?
None of it was fabricated, it was all real. I'm
Okay.
telling you, it, you know, just look at the statistics. I mean, when um when you children were little, there were several alerts that were sent out to parents about kidnappers in the area. There was at one point there was a kidnapping ring that was operating out of Washington, D.C., that was specializing in kidnapping blonde hair, blue eyed children and taking them to Mexico and selling them.
Oh, wow.
And as a matter of fact, when I was um, working at a preschool in Colombia, we were told by the police that morning, don't take the kids outside, keep them inside, watch them very carefully, that there had been a kidnapping attempt of a toddler right around that area that morning.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, it wasn't like I was trying to scare you. I was trying to keep you safe because, unfortunately, that is the way the world is crumbling.
Well, what about latchkey kids then? How do you explain that? Because latchkey kids came about in the 70s and 80s and crime was still around. So why was it that latchkey kids kind of developed?
Actually, latchkey kids were around when I was a kid. It wasn't the norm, but the concept of the latchkey kid is basically the idea that both parents are working full time, nobody's home, and that the kid carries their own key to the house with them and has to let themselves in.
Mm.
So that came with basically parents having to work full time. I mean, I heard about when I was in high school. I was like, elementary, middle school. You would hear about kids who basically had to let themselves in the house and nobody was there for a while. Um, but that was my situation. My mother never liked that idea. As a matter of fact, she felt as we got older, just the opposite, that she wanted to keep and even how to say she wanted to keep a more caring, uh, guarding look on us as we were becoming independent teenagers to make sure we stayed in line.
Did you?
And there was no hanky panky.
Ima, did you stay in line?
I plead the fifth.
Okay, I'll take that. So did Bubby work at all, or no? She.
Well, she actually, we at the time, we didn't think she was working. I mean, she was always home. But in retrospect, and I was discussing this with one of my sisters, she said, wait a minute, Bubby was helping our father in the business. She was home all the time, so she was able to answer the phone and take the chicken and fruit and vegetable orders. Wednesday was chicken day, where she would prepare each chicken order custom made, however the customer wanted it, cutting fourths, cutting eighths, um, a whole chicken, and she would take these chickens and cut them exactly the way the customer wanted. She would go through the chicken very carefully and take out all the like the teeny little pin feathers. Like even
Yeah.
though chickens, there's a flicking machine these days, it flicks the all the feathers. Still, you know yourself that whenever you buy a chicken from the store, every now and then you come across like around certain parts of the chicken, especially the wings, there are these teeny little, pin feathers. And so she would go through with with a small knife and make sure they were all totally out. She would clean the chicken
Okay.
thoroughly. And in fact, this was before the day of actually being able to buy your chickens already koshered. You had to kosher them yourself. So she would kosher them for the customers.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Wait, what about
soak it,
shchita?
soak it. Oh, not from the shlita. No,
No, no.
because
Who
my
was who was? Did you know the shochet? Did you have? Were you familiar with them? Were they like a family friend?
well, I was a kid. I was a little kid, but my father was. My father would go down the Shefting house in those days was I think on Quantico Avenue in Park Heights, Lower Park Heights.
Oh wow.
And my father would go there very early in the morning, and he would get the chickens right from the Shefting house.
Oh, so the shechting house would buy the chickens, and then they would sell the shechted chickens to Zaidy and other vendors.
Right, exactly. hmm Then later on, my father eventually um it was I think it was during like the had to be like the late 1960s, early 70s was when the stores started to sell the chickens as we know it, like koshered, already koshered, and cut into. You could buy them, in packages. You can buy them cut in fours. You can buy them whole. You might have cut in eighths. So by that time, my father saw it didn't pay for him to continue the chicken part of his business
Mm-hmm.
because it was no longer lucrative because people could get these chickens already, you know, uh, cleaned and however they wanted them cut in the store. But he kept up the fruit and vegetable part of his business. And also at that time, he started working in my uncle's restaurant, Danny's restaurant, which um,
Yeah.
it was many people remember that restaurant. It was a very famous 5-star restaurant. And so my father would work there also.
So I my question then is, um, was there like a mashgiach or kind of like a Star K kind of situation where like Zadie had to get certified or get a stamp or have someone watch over him, or at this point in time there was more like a trust with the community and there wasn't really any need for it?
There was no Vadakashris at the time. There was no Star K. Um, and there was one time, well, my father, since he went to Quantico Avenue and picked up the chickens already shechted, from shochet, so there was no problem with that. So there was one day though that a rabbi did call him and asked him questions about the way that what my mother did with the chickens, how she prepared them, how she koshered them, and my father told him in detail what my mother did, and the rabbi seemed okay and pretty
Yeah.
pleased with it, and that was it.
I mean, like that's kind of I think it's kind of funny because it's like nowadays people would find it rude or just invasive, but like you have to ask these questions to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
um and my other question I had was, did you ever do a ride along with Sadie when he was working?
Yes, I did. I guess I made that mistake. When I was 10 years old, there was one, well, we weren't religious. It was one Saturday where I decided I wanted to help him out on the truck. So it was during the summertime. So we said, okay, brought me along. And boy, it was hard. Well, I helped him carry a lot of the orders to, it was Saturday, his business was, I don't know, some part in Baltimore. It was a very, very like redneck, what we would call a redneck neighborhood.
Okay.
It was a redneck neighborhood. I don't know where it was. Had to be like maybe southeast Baltimore, something like that, southwest. I don't know, right? You know, and he sold fruits and vegetables. He also sold crabs. And by the way, he also sold, would you believe, muskrats.
Why?
He had Goisha customers that ate muskrats.
Interesting.
And I had a chance to see these muskrats. I mean, they were basically they looked like large they looked like large moles or large rats, and they were skinned, and they still had the fur on they still had the head, and they had the fur on their head. So you could tell they were muskrats, but the rest of their body was skinned and cleaned.
Oh wow.
And so anyway, I saw this at one time in the back of his truck. Um, he also sold crabs on Saturday, and so I helped him do that. And he told me that when I sell the crabs, when people buy them, I should give the crabs a tap on the shell, and if you tap a crab on the shell, its claw goes up to try to get you. And he says if the crab doesn't move like that, yeah, throw it out. Don't sell it because it means it's dead. And crabs, when these crabs, seashell, when the trafe shellfish is full of bacteria,
Mm-hmm.
and the minute they die, that bacteria starts to multiply immediately, and that's how people can get poisoned by
Oh wow.
eating a bad crab it's they say a bad crab. It meant that the crab was dead when they cooked it. They have to cook them live.
Oh wow.
And so I remember there was this one family where I brought them however many crabs they had ordered and tapped each one on the shell. When I came into the kitchen with the box of crabs, they already had this huge pot of boiling water
That's awesome.
already. Then there was one experience I had in, I guess you would call it business etiquette. I learned it the hard way on this particular trip where I was going around selling peaches, bags of peaches to these people and, going from door to door. And there was this big ugly guy, and he took a peach and he wanted to see if basically he wanted to sample it. He like squeezed the peach in half with his, I remember like 10 years old, I'm looking up at this big ugly guy, and he squeezes the peach in half and he stuffs it in his mouth and says, okay, he'll buy the bag. So then there was this other guy I went to, and who was buying a bag of peaches. So he takes the bag of peaches and he puts out a hand with money in it. And I thought the way he was putting out his hand was for me to take the money.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. He's got this money in his hand and he's holding it in his hand, he's putting it out. So I of course went to take the money, and he grabbed my hand very tightly and squeezed it, and then threw my hand down. He says, let me teach you a lesson in how to accept money. He says, you put out your hand and I put the money into it.
Interesting.
That's because
Yeah.
evidently that was not what he was going to pay me. He was just taking out his money. And since his hand was open and the money was out towards me, that's
Yeah.
what I thought I was supposed to take it. But
Hey, you're a
so
10-year-old
then
kid. What are you gonna do?
yeah. So I learned that lesson very, very quickly.
I mean, that's kind of funny where you talk about like the 1960s, how adults treated children, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I know talking about this, we've talked about this previously about the difference of the fact that you had to raise Gen X, millennials, and then
Mm-hmm.
like late millennial, almost Gen Z.
Oh, but there's one more thing that I want to say
Yeah.
about helping my father. I also helped him carry. He had a big pile of watermelons in his truck, and I was helping him shove these watermelons. I mean, I was only 10 years old, and I was able to carry 25-pound watermelons. So I had a lot. I really developed a lot of upper body strength. So anyway, but it was halfway through the day after all these hours of walking and selling all this produce and crabs and everything. I came into the truck. I was exhausted, and it was hot. It was so hot, and my father's truck was not refrigerated. Refrigerated trucks were very expensive. So my father's refrigeration method is air conditioning. His air conditioning was very environmentally friendly. It was total wind power. He opened up all the doors, and as you drove, the wind blew through it, and that was the air conditioning. So I came into the truck. I fell down on these cool watermelons, this whole pile, and I just closed my eyes and I said, Dad, take me home. He just laughed and he took me home. I didn't make it through the day.
Oh gosh. I did your sisters ever go on any ride-alongs?
No, they were smarter than that.
What made you want to join and go on the ride-along?
Um,
Okay.
I wanted to help them. Well, let's put it this way: there was a joke among some of my friends when I was a teenager. One friend in particular, they used to say, "You're the closest thing to a son your father has." I was a real tomboy.
That's awesome. Um, so I guess when you got older and became a teenager, um, did Zaidy's business changed over time? Um, or did he still sell produce? Because I'm trying to remember, because I just remember him as being retired. I don't remember him ever, you know,
Mhm.
not doing the produce.
He eventually, well, he worked more and more at my uncle's restaurant, and what he did was, he also provided my uncle with the fruits and vegetables that he needed in his restaurant.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so he was able to do that plus working at the restaurant, and eventually he cut back on the number of days he was doing the produce business. Then, when he hit like around 70, his he had uh, he had osteoporosis, which runs in our family. But my grandmother had it very badly, and my father had it very badly because evidently vitamin D was not added to milk until the 1930s. And the reason they added it was because they found that vitamin D was very helpful in helping the body to assimilate calcium from the milk.
Hmm.
And it was a very good bone builder. And my father was born 1918.
Oh, so he had a long time where he
So,
just
yeah,
wasn't.
so he was having a lot of trouble, unfortunately, with his bones. It was becoming harder and harder for him to carry all these heavy, you know, boxes of fruits and vegetables. And also his truck was breaking down. And he said, you know what, at the age of 70, he said, I'm not going to go to the bank and borrow, to buy like a big truck like he needed. You were talking about a lot of money. And he says, I'm not at 70 going to borrow money from the bank for this. And so he went ahead and took retirement at 70.
Oh, wow. Um, did you have was there any health stuff that you had as a kid that now's become obsolete or that you thought was healthy and now is like proven wrong?
Hmm, that's a very good question. I'm trying to think back. Um, no, actually, I can't. I can't think the basics of fruits, vegetables, um, exercise. Um, Me and my sisters, we did that all. We just did that all the time as part of our lifestyle.
Hmm.
My father did that, and that's the same advice that they're giving people today to you know to stay healthy. Eat those fruits and vegetables, and and exercise, and that was. I'm trying to think if there was anything that they thought was healthy in my day that turned out not to be. Um, mm, the only thing I could think of that they thought was healthy, which we found was not, was yelling at your kids and smacking them.
Yeah.
They thought that was healthy. They thought that built character.
Well, it's funny because I was trying to talk to you about it earlier, and I'm realizing we've talked about it in a previous podcast, but I'm not sure if we can like maybe dive into it a little more.
Well, that's
Uh,
why I joke around. I joke around with some of the teachers in our school when they talk about kids being ADD, ADHD. So I tell them, oh, in my day, they had a very good way of dealing with ADHD. They had what I call belt therapy, and so these teachers didn't get the joke, and they look at me and go, belt therapy. They go, well, they think they like they have like look at me very very curiously, and they go, what was belt therapy? They really thought I'm talking about real therapy. So I said, oh, your parents would smack you with a belt and tell you sit down, pay attention.
it's the thing is that like it's we're realizing it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. Like, yeah, it'll fit, but then it's not going to be as functional as it could be. Um, because like I'm seeing my friends and I'm seeing other people how they want to raise their kids and talk to their kids, and you're trying to get them to retain information and make smart decisions. Like you don't want to control them because then that's exhausting. That means you have to constantly tell them what to do. And that just is going to be a headache in the long run. What you want to teach them to do is how to be independent, but smart enough where they make the right decisions so you don't have to worry about them too much.
Well, my mother had, I don't know if it was Dr. Spock's book or not, but you've heard of Benjamin Spock.
No,
No, oh my gosh.
no, never have.
Okay, he was world famous. Dr. Benjamin Spock. I think this might have been his book. Wrote a very, very famous book on child rearing, where he was trying to get parents away from being over controlling and from using you know being too punitive with their kids. And so he wrote a very famous book on child rearing. um I forgot if he was a pediatrician or if he was a child psychologist. You'd probably have to Google the name Benjamin Spock.
I'll check them out.
But when the 1960s, late 1960s hit, and you had all these student riots that were breaking out um, to protest the war in Vietnam, a
Yeah.
lot of the media blamed him. And they
Oh
said it was
wow.
because of Dr. Spock's "don't hit your kids" philosophy that, why now we have a whole generation that's just rebelling and just acting out and just, violating all the rules of decency. And I was watching some interviews with Dr. Spock at the time, because by this time I was like late high school, early college. And as a matter of fact, there was a very famous picture. Dr. Spock actually went to one of the student demonstrations, and there's a very famous picture of him with the students demonstrating with them against the war of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Spock in this interview was answering these media people and saying that is not that was not what I meant in the book. I didn't mean not discipline your child, not correct them. He said that he just meant that there are better ways of doing it than yelling at your kid and smacking them and putting them down. Yeah. So I remember it was a big green book. I'm almost sure it was Dr. Spock's book. I remember every now and then picking it up when I was, oh my gosh, I was like 11, maybe I was like 11 or 12 years old. I took it out of the bookshelf and I was reading it. And there was a chapter on timidity, being timid, being overly
Yeah.
shy. And Dr. Spock said in that chapter that what causes timidity in children is um, when the parents try to do everything for the child and don't let them do anything for themselves. And that leads to timidity, because then the child is afraid of like spreading their wings and trying to do things on their own.
Mm. Um, it's interesting because I'm reading up about him and he had an interesting life socially, politically. Um, people he did get backlash. And
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't 100% perfect. Like I kind of disagree with him on a few things, but just having that understanding. It's funny because I remember you telling me about the Lubavitch Rebbe noticing um young kids in the 60s starting to look for a spiritual meaning, and that
Mm-hmm.
it's another sign of Mashiach. And I'm thinking of like the same thing with today, where it's like the teenagers today, like what are they looking for, and what's the next layer we're trying to get to, um, as a closer means to the end.
Good question. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But going back to Benjamin Spock,
Mm-hmm.
I was reading an interview with him. I forgot what magazine it was. It was a magazine interview, and they were asking him questions about his own childhood. It was hysterical. It was so funny. He said he was raised in this family in, I think it was New England or something, and the parents were very strict. The mother would never permit them to eat in a restaurant ever. She felt that the restaurant food was filthy, was dirty, was very unhealthy. And so she was he said finally there was one time he was with his father. They took a trip somewhere, just he and his father, and his father took him to a restaurant. He goes, "Oh boy," he's imagining this is going to be really terrific. He's thinking about himself. He's going to order a hamburger. He's going to order a hot dog. You know, all those things his mother doesn't let him eat, like hot dogs and hamburgers. That was another thing. She didn't like hot dogs or hamburgers. She felt they were unhealthy. So he says he goes to the restaurant with his father. He was a little boy, and the waiter starts to, you know, tell him all the things that they have, like hot dogs, hamburgers, French fries, whatever. And the father's going, no, 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 because he thinks all this stuff is unhealthy. So finally, the man said, well, maybe you would like tombstone stew. And so Dr. Spock was explaining tombstone stew is toast, pieces of toast floating in warm milk. And he said he couldn't figure out, was it called tombstone stew because the pieces of bread were shaped like a tombstone, or was it called tombstone stew because the people that eat that are so old they can't eat anything else that they're going to die soon?
um yeah, there's a lot that you can learn. I can learn from, I guess, people like Dr. Spock. Was there any Jewish version of that when you started having children?
There was a lady, a very good and there's I don't know if she was an American who had made Aliyah or if she was a Sabra. I don't know. Her name, I think, was Miriam Levy. And she was a social worker with 10 kids of her own. And that's what I liked about her, because a lot of the articles that were being written about child rearing at the time were by people who either were never married, never had kids, or maybe had one kid that was raised basically raised by a nanny that they hired. She, on the other hand, she was a mother of 10 kids and she raised all 10 of them. Plus, she was a social worker. And she wrote a series of articles on discipline. I forgot what she wrote. But I remember. Oh, I remember. I don't remember the specifics of what she wrote, but I remember thinking that it was a very very good article that she wrote. Except with one exception, she did believe in smacking kids. Not a lot, but she believed that
She was Israeli.
every now and then a potch. Yeah. Every now and then, like she was one kid she was working with who the parents were very, very permissive. This kid was a brat and she was trying to do like some sort of therapy with this kid. And the kid was totally uncooperative and very nasty. And she finally smacked the kid. And the mother said, now she will hate you. And just the opposite. The kid couldn't wait to come to the sessions. The kid, after that, was totally cooperative and got a lot out of the therapy.
So, what do you think about hitting kids?
I, I remember I had an education professor in college who almost like the one, you know, we brought that up because when I was in college, it was a controversy. It was going back and forth. Should you hit a kid? In what way should you hit a kid? Because our generation was just coming out of that very very strict, heavy discipline where kids were really smacked very very much. I told you about Goyish friends of mine told me that their discipline was that they had to go in the backyard and pick a switch, pick a stick
Oh
from
yeah,
one of
yeah,
the yeah, of which and give it to the father or the mother, and that's the stick they would be hit with.
yeah.
So this was a main topic of discussion in a lot of our psychology and education classes. And this one education professor said to us, I believe in hitting. It's great therapy for the parents. Does nothing for the child, but it's great therapy for the parents.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. I don't like the idea of hitting. I'd rather use other methods. But when all else fails and nothing else is working, and the kid is very much out of control, you, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
It's better than just letting this kid, because I've seen situations like that,
Oh, where kids are just being so abstinent and bratty and
and
out of
nothing was
control.
nothing was working,
You just
and
smack them around.
yeah, I mean, I got to the point a couple times, not with you, we didn't, you were pretty good, you were a pretty good kid, but there were a couple occasions with some of your other brothers and sisters where I either had to finally threaten to hit them, didn't carry it up, but threaten, or I had to actually, I warned them first though. I said, look, you can either, one of your siblings, um, he needed me to work with him with the schoolwork. He refused. I offered him $1. Here, he's $1. He said,
I think I
you're
remember
gonna get
this.
this stuff.
I actually
And
remember
he
being there
wouldn't do
watching
it.
this.
And finally I smacked him. And then he cooperated and he
Yeah.
read. And I
Yeah.
said to him, now instead of you getting this dollar, I handed him the dollar. I said, now you have to pay me back the dollar for all the effort I had to spend now getting you to cooperate. Now it's my dollar.
I literally remember that. I have a vivid memory of that happening. Yes, I know who you're talking about. I remember that because I remember like sitting there like, dude, just take the freaking dollar. What's wrong with you?
I
Um,
know. It's like, what? Are you crazy? And then one time with one of your sisters, she was really doing very poorly in spelling. She was like in second grade, and she was failing all her spelling tests. So I was trying to work with her, and she refused to work with me. She refused to review her spelling words. So finally, I took out a belt. I didn't hit her. I took out a big belt. I put it on the table, and I pointed to it. I said, "Is this the only thing you understand?" And she sat down with me, and she reviewed all her spelling words. The next day, she comes home from school. Friday. Friday are usually spelling test days. She comes into the house, flies over to me. She gives me a big hug and kiss. She tells me how much she loves me. And I said to her, I don't understand. Yesterday I threatened you with a belt, and today you're hugging and kissing me, telling me how much you love me. And she smiled and said, Ema, I got an 80 on my spelling test. First
oh.
time she had actually passed, and not just passed, but passed with a B.
So out of curiosity though, from your oldest to your youngest, where is the ratio of hits? Like like the oldest is the most, and by the time you got the youngest, you just didn't hit anymore. And the question I have for you
That
is,
is true.
why did it drop? Is it because you learned other methods that were better and more efficient? That just maybe hitting really never really worked. You just didn't discover new methods.
A thought just occurred to me in that, when parents talk about raising their kids, we all have the tendency to to draw this picture of ourselves as the picture parent perfect parent.
Yeah.
No matter how lousy we might be, we think we talk about ourselves as though we're the perfect parent. Of course, I wasn't. But you're right. I think what it is, a couple things, and I'm not the only one. A lot of parents will tell you this, that as you get older, you do get more patience.
Mm-hmm.
You do get more patience, and as you have more children, things that really upset you in your older kids, now when you see it in your younger kids, it's like, oh, that's normal. You're not so upset by it because you see that's like a normal pattern. It's like, you know, being a parent is very, very much like any other type of job. The more you work at it, the more you learn, the more experience you gain. I mean, anybody with any career, people go through
Yeah.
evolutions in their career. They start out, from whatever training they have, with whether it be college, whether it be a trade school, whether it be them wanting to start a business. And at first, you're not sure of yourself. You don't really have a lot of techniques that are under your belt. But as time goes on, you develop better techniques. You learn more about your profession. You become more successful at it.
Yeah. I mean, out of curiosity, then, what bothered you about the older siblings that eventually you learned to accept with the younger siblings?
That's a really good question. Well, I remember the first time when your older sister was about 3 or 4 years old, maybe. And I told her she had to pick up her toys, and she yelled at me, "I hate you." And I had never heard that before. This is my first child. She's only like 3, 4 years old. And I was devastated. I really was. I started crying. Said, "Here, I did so much for this child, and I brought her into the world, and I took care of her and everything. And now she tells me she hates me. Oh, I must be a failure as a mother." But then, as she got a little older, I kind of like, I don't know, I got wiser, smarter. And there was another time that I told her she had to pick up all her toys. And this was like maybe a year or two later. She was a little older. She was like 5, 6 years old. And she goes, "I hate you." And I wasn't at all flustered. I realized, aha, this is, emotional blackmail. And I said to her, "You are entitled to your feelings, but you still have to pick up your toys." And she goes, "Ah."
That's awesome. Yeah,
So I
it's like,
realized as the kids got, as the kid, with the kids, like I was able to detect emotional blackmail, get a little smarter about it.
I guess you also develop more patience and confidence. And with
Yes, exactly.
that comes the feeling of the realizing it's not necessary to go so harsh on your punishments, because punishments are really there trying to control the situation. But with
Mm-hmm.
patience and confidence, you understand that it's going to be fine. You just need to wait them out, and you have more patience because you have more knowledge and comprehension that they do. They're just like 1 year old. You have like 35, 40 years above them, and there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, there's also something too. There were a few books I read which encouraged parents to let the child suffer the natural consequences of their action. In other words, you tell your child, "Hey, you do this right away. I'm going to give you, I'll give you a toy. I'll give you the, you'll get a reward for it. You don't do it, you're not getting your reward." And the kid, of course, doesn't do it. And they say, "Hey, where's, my this or my that or my toy or whatever you brought?" Well, I'm sorry, you didn't do the job I told you to do, and therefore you cannot get this.
Yeah. Was there any
Or
reason
mhm.
why, like,
Oh, I want to recommend a book, by the way.
yeah, go ahead, recommend a book.
Okay, it is it is one of my granddaughter's favorite and one of my favorites too. If anybody can buy it, it's great. It's called Cozy Rosie Learns to Clean Her Room.
Cozy Rosie learns to clean his room. That sounds cute.
Cozy Rosie Learns to Clean Her Room. It's adorable.
Awesome. I'll check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I guess in conclusions from now is that, like, it just, as a new parent, you're going to be nervous, you're going to be concerned, you're going to be worried, and the answer is that,
Oh, are
like,
you asking me these questions because you planning on being a parent soon?
Ema, we have like a lot of listeners, and it's not just me, other people. I care about other
Oh, it's
people.
just you and me, honey.
Nah, it's
Just
fine. Don't worry
just
about it.
like sitting at a kitchen table.
Sitting at a kitchen table. Yes, yes, yes. That's all. Yeah. So just wanted to confirm. But yeah, I think that's it. We're almost out of time. But
Trying
I
to
love
relish
you
the
very, very
issue.
much. I love you very much.
Love you too.
Um,
Mhm.
mwah, mwah. Take care.
Have a great Shabbos.
You too. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, honey. Bye bye.